Hello everyone, before we get started, I would just like to say that I am not a fluent Korean speaker. I am a beginner and I'm learning, and all of my tips that I will be giving are just what personally works for me. Doesn't have to necessarily work for you, so please take all of my tips with a grain of salt. And yeah, let's get straight into it. Hi, Editing Jess here. I just wanted to say that I say many Korean phrases throughout this video, and I am so sorry if I butcher them because I am just a beginner and I am probably butchering, so I am so sorry for all of the native Korean speakers. But yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm doing my best, and yeah, please don't make fun of me. So this book is the Korean for All book. It is by Soo Kim, and she is a professional Korean teacher. There is lots of really good content in here, lots of graphics, lots of vocabulary and grammar, plus they have a lot of examples. I worked through it a little bit, as you will see in the video, and I highly recommend it. I think it's a great resource for beginners. So I've already learned Hangul, so I skipped that lesson, but obviously if you haven't learned it, then that is a great place to start. Right now I am writing all of the vocabulary words down for the first one, and again, all of this is very beginner friendly. Like some of these I actually didn't know, but like a good amount of them were one of the first Korean words that I learned when I started learning Korean, and I like that they have an option where you can trace it, because then it helps you with your handwriting and just overall give you a feel for writing the word out. But this is all very beginner friendly, and I love the graphics. They just make learning a lot more fun and a lot more interesting. Because I am not a native Korean speaker and I don't know what the words actually sound like, I'm going onto this website and typing in the words that I have to make sure that I'm pronouncing them correctly, and just to hear what they sound like, just to, you know, kind of like imitate by myself. So I will type it in and then I will play on the computer and then repeat it back and then do that a few more times. And then I also put some notes by the specific words that have like a kind of weird pronunciation, or like, you know, I make a note. So yeah, now I will be making flashcards. Last video I used Quizlet, but now I'm using physical flashcards just because I want to have like some more experience writing, and I think it also just makes it more fun because I can draw little pictures next to it. And yeah, again, I am only showing you beginner, like literally one of the first lessons of the book, so don't worry, you will be able to learn more advanced vocabulary as the book goes on, but it's important to build a foundation first. So now I'll be giving you some tips on how I memorize and learn vocabulary. I have 3 categories for vocabulary words. 1, the ones I can make connections to, 2, the ones that look funny, and 3, the ones you just have to remember, no shortcuts. So the first one is the one I stumble upon the most, and I'll give you an example. So the word 물고기 means fish. 물 means water and gogi means meat. So a direct translation is that fish is water meat, which makes sense, and that helps me remember instead of just remembering the sound. Making these connections also help you engage with the language and tie in other words that you know for extra practice. Another way I can make connections is through other languages. Of course, you'll have to know other words in other languages for this tip to be helpful, which is the downside. I'm a native Mandarin speaker, and there are a lot of words in Korean that sound similar to words with the same meaning in Mandarin. For example, the word 공주 means princess in Mandarin, but in Korean, 공주 is princess. So these sound almost identical, except that Mandarin has the inflections. This makes memorizing certain words much easier when you connect them with words you already know. For the second category, I don't use a lot because there are just not that many words that fit into this criteria. But for example, the word 옷 is the word for clothes in Korean. To me, the Hangul for 옷 looks like a person. People wear clothes. That's how I make the connection. This is kind of a silly tip, but with the right imagination, it works. And of course, for the third one, there are just some words that you just have to memorize if you aren't able to find connections. Some of these words might be the more complex words, such as Korean numbers, or lengthy verbs like 부끄럽다 or 발견하다. So now we're moving on to grammar. In this video, I am working on the second lesson, which is about introducing yourself. And honestly, I think this is a great beginner lesson because introducing yourself is one of the basic things you should be able to do in a language, and if you are striving for conversational Korean, then this is very helpful. I went straight into the dialogue without actually looking at the second page, which was a mistake because, as you can see, I'm searching up some words that I do not know, even though they were literally defined on the next page. So make sure you aren't like me and just first of all skim all of the pages first before you just jump straight into the dialogue. But anyways, I do like that they give you a dialogue to work with because it shows you a very real life conversation. I also highly recommend marking up your books. That way you just kind of are able to write down notes or specific tips that might help you learn or understand a certain thing. Now I'm taking the examples on the second page and then writing them down and then doing them by myself. That way I can kind of exercise the skill that was taught on the page and also just have some more practice in writing. Something I do think that could be improved upon in this book is explaining the structure of the sentences more, because Korean grammar structure is very different from English and other European languages. But overall, this workbook is really great for beginners. Now it's time for some grammar tips. I definitely think grammar is the most difficult thing about Korean, but hopefully with my tips it'll be easier to grasp. So I love marking up my example sentences because by breaking up pieces of the sentences makes the grammar structure a lot less intimidating. Let's take this sentence as an example. 안녕하세요. 저는 크리스티나예요. 이름이 뭐예요? As a beginner, this sentence is kind of scary, but let's break it down. The beginning is just a greeting, she's saying hello. Now the next phrase, 저는, means I. This is the subject. Christina, or the Korean way of saying Christina, would be the object of the sentence, and yeyo means am or is, and that is the verb. So she's saying she is Christina, but in Korean, the order of the sentence would be I, Christina, am. Not as bad anymore, right? Next she says 이름이, this is the object and it means name. Then she says 뭐예요, which means what is. So she's asking the person what their name is. So what seemed like an intimidating sentence is now very simple, and marking which is the subject, object, and verb, in my opinion, makes it easier to understand as an English speaker. Of course, once you get to more complex sentences, breaking these down won't be as simple, but as a beginner, this is what I highly recommend doing because it allows you to practice with the unfamiliar grammar structure and understand it more. But of course, the number one tip is to practice. Practicing is the most important thing when it comes to languages, which is why this workbook is so helpful, because you could learn a lesson and then work on the practice problems throughout the week. And finally, I also supplement my learning in the workbook with the website How to Study Korean, and as well as YouTube videos. I think the workbook does a great job giving you a bunch of graphics, giving you a very entertaining way to learn, and also does a great job of explaining certain concepts as well as dialogues and example sentences. But basically combine your learning sources and then you will be able to get a good understanding of Korean.